how much of the Old Testament is actually accurate? Like, we can toss up the Torah to being stories, the flood, Methuselah being 900 years
Right,
old,
right, right.
um, all that kind of Graham Hancock wanting to prove stuff. Um, we know that that's just not. Jonah didn't get swallowed by a fish.
Right.
If he did, he wouldn't have survived that.
Yeah.
Um, so when does the Bible start becoming historically relevant?
So I think that the first archaeological evidence that we have from non-biblical
That's
sources
what
that
I'm talking. Yeah.
actually directly attests to biblical sources comes in the ninth century. So right around the time we have the introduction of historical narrative prose, we have references to some folks from the Bible. So the three earliest ones that I know of are the Mesha inscription, which is considered like the first example of narrative prose in alphabetic writing by a lot of scholars. It's probably somewhere around 840 BCE, but this is the Moabite king who writes this story on this big standing stone and says, "I, Mesha, king of Moab, blah blah blah." He tells about all his conquests.
Where can people find info on that?
If you look for the Mesha inscription online, you should be able to find a translation without too much trouble. But there are critical editions that have been published that will give you, diagrams, and it's not all preserved. It's actually a fascinating story. It was found as a single standing stone, but because a lot of European powers were wrestling over who got this thing, even though it was found and belonged to some Bedouin tribes, in order to kind of stick it to them.
That's what we do.
Yeah, the Bedouin tribes actually destroyed it. They put it on a fire for a long, long time, waited for it to get its stone. They put it on a fire for a long, long time, and then doused it in a bunch of cold water, and it just cracked and fell apart. And there was someone who managed to take what's called a squeeze right before this happened, a European, and this is basically where they soak paper in water and then put it on top and press it down so the paper kind of expands into the cracks. Yeah, and then you wait for it to dry and then pull it off.
It's the pencil over the quarter.
It's something like that. Yeah. And so someone actually managed to take a squeeze of it and run off with it as they were heating it up to destroy it. Yeah. But and so I say we Europeans managed to recover a little less than half of the pieces, but we can reconstruct most of the rest of it from the squeeze, but there are still gaps. But this refers to the Omri dynasty, Omri from the Old Testament, and it talks about how Omri's son afflicted Moab, basically put them under vassalage, and then Mesha was able to deliver them from that vassalage, and tells a story about how they invaded a cult site at Nebo, and they ran off with Adonai's instruments, cult instruments, and took them back and put them before Chemosh. And then it talks about how Israel then invaded Moab to try to punish them for throwing off vassalage, but Chemosh, the patron deity of Moab, ran them out of Moab. And some people think that this confirms the story that we have in 2 Kings 3 about Edom and Israel and Judah invading Moab because they threw off vassalage, but then ultimately failing to destroy Moab. And if that is the case, I think that lends strength to the interpretation of 2 Kings 3:27, where this great fury forces Israel to retreat, is probably the intervention of the Moabite deity Chemosh.
Wait, are you saying God lost a battle?
God lost a battle.
Oh
God,
He's Jehovah Rapha. What are you talking about?